Time now for The Exchange. Joining me is Shelly Palmer. He's a professor of advanced media in residence at Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications. He's also CEO of the Palmer Group, a consulting practice that helps Fortune 500 companies with technology, media, and marketing. Shelly, welcome to the program. First, let's just talk about what's expected to happen in the weeks to come before this deadline of January 19th, and that is a Supreme Court hearing arguments on January 10th in a last-minute emergency injunction filed by ByteDance, and their argument squarely focuses on the First Amendment. What do you make of the fact that the Supreme Court has decided to hear this case and their argument that this is an infringement on a constitutional right?
I think we've got a couple of different things going on here at the same time. There's a legal argument about the First Amendment, and I think the Supreme Court is right to take up that particular case because this does feel like the first time in a long time that America has gone and banned an entire industry using this particular technique. I think prohibition was the last time we put this many cottage industries out of business. But in practice, there are a lot of different things going on here, and I'm not sure everybody is on the same page. There's this idea that there's a national security threat, and nobody can confirm or deny this because the Chinese are not going to say they're getting the data, and Americans who want to say that the Chinese are getting the data are going to say that. And the question is, what data are they getting, if any, and if so, how dangerous is it? So that's one conversation. There's another conversation about First Amendment, which is what they're taking to the Supreme Court, which is a completely different argument. And basically it says we have the right to free speech, and there's a whole First Amendment side of this. And then there's the other part of this that nobody's talking about, which is that ultimately data privacy is what needs to be talked about because the data elite in America as well as outside of America are playing a game that most government officials are completely unaware of, and they're not discussing it. They're simply looking at this as, well, TikTok must be a national security threat. And then there's a fourth level of this, which is that TikTok is highly addictive, and probably the most addictive app ever created. And what it does to our youth and what it does to people who become addicted to it is almost unimaginable and not being discussed.
So then what do you make then of the government's primary argument, which focuses specifically on the national security threat? Do you think that they've missed an opportunity to expand their case here?
I think this is a how often do you beat your wife question. Now everybody has to evaluate it. Now you must investigate it. We don't know. Nobody knows whether the Chinese government is getting this data. And by the way, how valuable is the data of you scrolling? If you're doom scrolling on TikTok and they have your quote information, what do they really know about you? They know how to put the right ad in front of you at the right time, right person, right time, right place, right message. But that's what all of the data elite are capable of. Meta can do that. Google can do that. Amazon can do that with their recommendation engine. All of the big hyperscalers, all of the biggest tech companies have a wealth of data about all of us. And they use it specifically to put the right content in front of us that's going to basically get us to click on ads or buy stuff. And so I'm trying to understand what the danger is that we're afraid of. If we're afraid that the Chinese government is going to know your name, address, and phone number, do you think they don't know your name, address, and phone number now? I mean, come on. So I'm not sure. No one's really articulated what the threat is. But again, it needs to be investigated because whatever that threat is, now the three-letter agencies need to investigate it. But it's missing a much larger point, a much larger point.
Well, this specific Supreme Court has heard arguments, other arguments regarding private companies that moderate social media platforms and free speech. So what does that tell you about any sort of leniencies that they may have and where they may ultimately decide this case? Do you think there's a chance that they could side with ByteDance?
So look, my guess is, and this is just a guess, and I really probably shouldn't speculate, but you've asked a question. If I was going to place a bet, I would say that the Supreme Court has agreed to hear it. They're going to stay this while they make a decision, which will allow the new administration to come to power. And because this is only like a few days in advance, when the new administration comes to power, some decisions will be made. That's my guess if I had to guess. Of course, it's impossible to tell. This is not something that any of us are going to have any power over. I know for a fact that everybody is scrambling to figure out what to do with the aftermath. One of the things that's not being talked about enough is that there are not only 170 million TikTok users actively every month, there are tens of millions, and I mean tens of millions of cottage industries. The creator economy is what it's generally known as. People who make their living, substantial amount of their living on TikTok. And I have to say, YouTube is going to be the beneficiary, as will Meta and Instagram, their Instagram
Why?
property. But realistically,
because they're U.S. owned? Because they're U.S. owned companies?
Well, because if you cancel TikTok, if you ban it, the creators have nowhere to go. They all have YouTube channels. They all have Instagram channels. They all have Facebook profiles. And so they're able to put their videos there. But I don't know that the revenue will be made up. And if it is, the recipients, the beneficiaries will be Meta and Google, mostly Google, because YouTube is the bigger video platform. But I think you're going to, I don't know where, even the biggest of the creators, they'll have a couple of million followers on TikTok. They'll only have a few 100,000 Instagram followers. Like it's usually a fraction of the number of followers. And so literally the government is putting these people out of business. And you may think that that's an okay thing to do, but I got to tell you, there's an awful lot of people, millions of people who are making their living off of TikTok right now. It's kind of a big deal. So what will the government do for them? We're shutting down TikTok. Okay. Do these people get benefits? Do they get is there any recourse? Do they have any way to make up the income? And the answer is no. They're all going to go scramble on Google platforms. They're going to go scramble on Meta platforms, and they're going to scramble wherever else they can to try and pick up the audiences that they had on TikTok. So the aftermath is going to be pretty financially devastating to a pretty large group of people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you've got an incoming administration who once, at one point in the last term, Donald Trump issued an executive order, right, to ban TikTok, and now here he is appearing to embrace it once again, if for no other reason than he likes the way he's portrayed and how many viewers he has on the platform. We'll continue to watch the story as it develops. Shelly Palmer, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.